Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, I do want to take a moment and introduce myself. My name is Adina Glencher, and I am the Senior HR Services Advisor here at PayEntry. You can see our email address on the screen, hrservices@payentry.com. If you ever have questions about our services or you're interested in learning more about any of the topics we're covering during these webinars, you can always shoot our team an email. And of course, I am not an attorney. I do have to state that. So nothing in this webinar or any of our webinars should constitute legal advice. If you would like information from your attorney or legal advice, please reach out to them directly. And as mentioned, for any content or for any questions, about the content of the training, you can reach out to our team and we'll have that email up at the end of the presentation as well. All right, why are we here today? Well, as I'm sure all of you know, this week is Valentine's Day and our team felt it was appropriate to talk about relationships. So we are going to be covering a few different topics. We're going to start with from love to lawsuit. We're going to talk about the SHRM survey results on workplace romance and the statistics associated with those. We're going to talk about the challenges of personal relationships at work, how to address relationships in the workplace. We're going to discuss creating a workplace relationship policy, and we're actually going to go into quite a few different policies and talk about the difference between them and maybe what might be best for your organization. Which leads me to the next one. What is the best policy? When is it harassment? The do's and don'ts of navigating workplace relationships, and then some action items for everybody to take away from today. And then, of course, we will end with a Q&A session. If we do not get to your question, you can, of course, email our team. During the presentation, feel free to ask any of your questions in the questions box. That's why it's there. And then we do have a handout as well in the handouts category. That is a copy of the slides from today, so feel free to download those for future reference. All right, let's start from love to lawsuit. So a relationship between employees in the workplace does not necessarily mean that a lawsuit will arise, thank goodness. But employee relationships may increase the employer's potential for liability. How so? If a workplace romance sours, the possibility for liability increases as one of the employees may claim sexual harassment, retaliation, or that the relationship as a whole was non-consensual. If the relationship was between a supervisor and a subordinate, then other subordinate coworkers are likely to claim favoritism or discrimination because of that workplace relationship. Maybe they were treating the person they were in a relationship with differently than other employees. So we're going to talk about this case. It's Patterson versus the state of Idaho. The Department of Health and Welfare released it. In this case, a supervisor was engaged in a romantic relationship with another employee, despite the employer's actual policy discouraging intra-office relationships. So not banning it, but definitely discouraging it. Another employee named Patterson alleged that because of this relationship, she was treated unfairly. Patterson reported their relationship to the HR specialist. Patterson then alleged that because she complained about the relationship, she was then retaliated against when she received negative performance reviews by this supervisor. So in this case, the Idaho Supreme Court found insufficient evidence to support Patterson's allegations. However, employers should absolutely take note that workplace romances can have detrimental legal effects that extend beyond the boundaries of the relationship. So we're going to start a quick poll. We're wondering, out of everybody watching today, in your professional career, have you had to address coworkers dating in your workplace? All right, let me launch this. Go ahead and click easy yes or no. All right, we'll give it just a few more seconds. I see some more answers coming in. Not a trick question. Have you had to deal with any coworkers dating in your workplace? This may be when you were, an entry-level employee or in your current role. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. So as you can see, we have 59% of you said, yes, I have had to deal with this, and 41% of you say no, which is actually shocking to me. I'm surprised there's not more yeses here. So for those of you who said no, thank you for coming today, and thank you for prepping yourself for the chances that this might occur in your workplace. It's always great to stay one step ahead. And for those of you who say yes, you are not alone. Many of us have indeed had to address this, and it's important to make sure we're doing so appropriately and legally. All right, thank you for your participation, and we're going to go ahead and move forward. Workplace romance looks a little different for everyone. It can range from flirting, going on dates, or even developing committed relationships. 40% of US workers say they have flirted with someone from their workplace. A quarter, 24%, have gone on a date with someone from their workplace, and 17% say they've been in an official relationship with someone from their workplace. So we can see this is happening quite a bit, so it's important that we get ahead of it. So we have a lot of words on the screen. We wanted to share some survey results from SHRM. So we're going to go through each of these together. Younger millennial and Generation Z workers are significantly more likely to say they'd be open to being in a workplace romance. So before we continue on there, if you haven't experienced this, you likely are going to, because as we all know, millennial and Generation Z workers are making up most of our workforce now and in the oncoming years. So 33% say that they are more likely to be open to being in a workplace romance. Then older millennial workers, which is about 15%, and then Generation X workers is about 27%, and baby boomer and traditionalist workers are at 23%. Among the 20% of US workers who are currently in a workplace romance or have been in one before, they develop their workplace romances through in-person dates and meetings. That's 79% of them, 55% of them through phone calls, 46% of them through direct messaging, and 27% of them through work-related events such as happy hours and work parties. So your employees are definitely bonding in those situations. 71% of US workers say their employer does not require employees to disclose if they are involved in a workplace romance. And we're going to dig into this as we go along in the presentation. And when it comes to disclosing workplace romances, US workers are far more likely to disclose to their colleagues rather than their employer for obvious reasons. And 40% have disclosed their relationship to their colleagues, while only 18, less than half, have disclosed their relationship to their employer. And lastly, most US workers who have been in a workplace romance say that work-related issues did not contribute much or at all to their breakup. And that's about 87% of people. 13% said that work-related issues contributed somewhat or a great deal. And what's more is nearly 1 in 5 US workers who have been in a workplace romance, so about 18%, say it negatively impacted their careers. So we have some real consequences here if it doesn't turn out quite as expected. So let's talk about the different types of workplace relationships. And of course, we wish it was as easy as what you see on the screen. We have professional relationships between coworkers, team members, managers, direct reports, maybe CEOs, board members, etc. And we have personal relationships. Those are, of course, friendships, family relationships, intimate romantic relationships. If it was as easy as keeping these in their own categories, we wouldn't even have a presentation to have today. But unfortunately, oftentimes the line between these is not as clear, I guess I should say, as it should be. So personal relationships can occur in the workplace. What's the challenge of that? Well, it can lead to claims of sexual harassment and discrimination, like we looked at in the case study. Retaliation and/or claims of retaliation are likely to occur if things don't go well. Conflicts of interest may arise. Unfair recruitment decisions may be made. Preferential and inconsistent treatment of employees can occur. Confidentiality breaches are more likely to occur. You know some personal information on someone else in your workplace. It can lead to diminished credibility of the supervisor. It can lead to lowered employee morale. and can lead to increased gossip, rumors, and complaints, and stalking and violence may even occur. So of course, not all of these or any of these are guaranteed to occur, but it's just some consequences to keep in mind. So what do we do? How do we address relationships in the workplace? Do we just tell everybody they're not allowed to date? Well, it's important that we establish a policy that prohibits an employee from supervising a person they have an intimate personal relationship with. Now, you can choose to do this or you can choose not to, and we'll kind of go over the pros and cons in doing so. It's important to identify jobs where personal relationships could jeopardize the safety or integrity of other employees. Talk to employees about job expectations. Be transparent. Focus on creating a positive work environment for all employees, including trusting and respecting the private life of employees. Make it clear to them that personal lives should be kept out of the workplace, and foster effective communication with your employees. Similar to any other policy or procedure in your workplace, it's important to, 1, have it in place, and 2, follow it. We don't just want to have a policy and ignore it for half of our employees or for our favorite employees. It's important that we treat everybody consistently, and that if we're going to write a policy, we have to follow it. The average person will spend about 90,000 hours at work in their lifetime. I know, that's what everybody wants to hear on a Friday eve. It's key to encourage transparency and professionalism while providing information on what is acceptable and unacceptable conduct, including instructions on when relationships need to be reported and to whom, especially if the relationship poses a conflict of interest. So we spend a lot of time at work. Let's be transparent and let's have these somewhat awkward discussions. Creating a workplace relationship policy. So when doing this, it's important to determine the company's stance on workplace relationships. There is no law that says employees can't date. So you get to decide, if you're a business owner or an HR professional, how you want to go about creating this policy. Consider these different kinds of relationships. Relationships between coworkers, managers and employees, clients and employees, vendors and employees, contractors and employees, and family and employees as well. All right, creating a workplace relationship policy. So there's a few things that you should consider including. Standard policies regarding workplace relationships generally include the following: what is and is not acceptable regarding behaviors, recruitment, management issues, and conflicts of interest, mandatory disclosure of romantic/intimate relationships. And if you've never heard of disclosing that, I can understand how that may come as a surprise to you. So we're going to talk about how to disclose and the best way to do so. A ban on relationships between superiors and subordinates, dealing with unwanted personal conduct or contact following the relationship or even during, a ban on public displays of affection within the workplace. None of us come to work and want to see two people making out in the lunchroom. That's not why we're here. Anti-discrimination statement prohibiting any kind of harassment or discrimination. And then, of course, what happens if the policy is breached? So disciplinary action. So there's a lot of policies you can implement, like I mentioned at the beginning. We're going to talk about essential policies, and we're going to dive into those. And then we're also going to touch on some optional policies. So it is essential that you have a conflict of interest policy. This is not only for relationships in the workplace, but conflict of interest policies often also cover conflicts between employees and clients and vendors and not working for a competitor, etc. So this is a great policy to have. Sexual harassment, and I believe almost all states at this point, if not all, require this be in your handbook. So definitely a harassment prevention policy outlining what harassment is, who to report to, and what constitutes harassment are generally the main topics covered. And then a workplace violence policy is crucial as well. We want to keep our employees safe. Other policies to consider having: anti-fraternization policies, personal relationship policies, employee dating policies, employment of relatives policies, and love contract. What is love contract? We're going to discuss it. So with the conflict of interest policy, a conflict of interest usually occurs when an individual's personal interests, whether that's family, friendships, financial, or social factors, could compromise their judgment, decision, or actions in the workplace. Like I mentioned, it doesn't have to be just with their romantic or personal relationship. Conflicts can occur when an individual makes or influences a decision and does so for some type of personal gain that may be unfair, unethical, or even illegal. When it comes to conflicts of interest, appearance is just as important as reality. This is why disclosing conflicts of interest is important. Disclosure is typically a more formal and documented process that most organizations have adopted in policy to address conflicts of interest. This disclosure is never verbal. It should absolutely be in writing. We want a paper trail. And the disclosure process is intended to help the workplace be transparent and accountable for, explain or justify their actions and their decisions. We always say in HR, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. It's the same thing when it comes to these disclosures. Some examples of conflicts of interest include hiring an unqualified relative to provide services your company needs. Maybe your brother or your mom or your dad really need a job. They've been looking for a while, and so you just hire them even though they're not the best candidate for the position, and maybe they're not even qualified. That's an example of a conflict of interest. Failing to disclose that you're in a relationship with the job candidate the company is considering can be a conflict of interest. Accepting a favor or a gift from a client above the amount specified is acceptable by the company, assuming there is an amount specified. Offering paid services on your time off to a company customer or supplier. Maybe a client or a customer is asking to do something that your company doesn't want you to do, going and doing it behind their back, and of course accepting payment for it is a huge conflict of interest. And failing to investigate a subordinate or coworker's wrongdoing because they are a friend, or maybe they are somebody you're in a relationship with, or maybe they're just your favorite employee, that can be a conflict of interest as well. All right. What do we do when workplace relationships lead to harassment? And when may this occur? If a coworker continues to pursue an employee, it may be a sign that this has now led to harassment. Unwanted touching or invasion of personal space, we all know that from our harassment trainings, hopefully. Damaging gossip, negatively speaking about the other, or sharing private information about the other partner. An employer or manager ends a relationship with a subordinate, and then we see unequal treatment or retaliation against their partner or their former partner because the relationship ended. Make sure you have an open door policy to make it comfortable for employees to come forward. Open door policies are so crucial. Sometimes they're called suggestion policies. Sometimes companies have both. But it's important that employees feel comfortable making these complaints if there are issues occurring, and that your supervisors and managers are truly making time for their employees. Sexual harassment prevention training is also so crucial. It's important that employees understand what behaviors are acceptable and are not acceptable, that they're provided with the education and the examples so that they can be appropriate in the workplace. Our team does offer harassment prevention training, so if that's something you're interested in, let us know. Supervisors must be trained on how to handle complaints. I can't tell you how many times as HR advisors or consultants, we get a call and it's about somebody who quit, and when they did the exit interview, they told the HR person that there was an issue that they brought to their manager and nothing ever happened, and that manager never told anyone else. So it's important that the managers and the supervisors know what to do when an employee comes to them and communicates an issue in the workplace. And it's important that they understand what situations actually require them to notify or involve human resources, and have a clear anti-harassment policy and reporting procedures. When things go wrong, which sometimes we know they do, the EEOC and courts may look at what preventative measures and policies an employer has in place and whether those measures and policies were followed. This is why we tell everybody, even if you're in a state or you have an employee count that doesn't require you offer harassment prevention training, still offer it. It can't hurt you. In fact, it can only help you because it's showing you're taking preventative measures. An employer with strong preventative measures and diligent follow-up is in a stronger position to defend itself if there's ever any kind of lawsuit. All right, now the do's and don'ts. Make sure that you do evaluate your policy options. There are a lot of options to consider, and figure out what's best for your organization, or talk with your HR professional to gain some recommendations based on what they know about your business. Develop standards of conduct. These should be in your handbook as well. Implement an anti-harassment policy. Consider requiring disclosures. Train supervisors and employees. Treat all employees fairly. Do not, of course, violate state protections or discriminate against applicants or employees. Don't wait until conduct becomes severe. Don't violate laws protecting lawful off-duty conduct. Don't disregard power differences between a manager and employee, and don't fail to take steps to prevent retaliation. All right, so we're going to go through a scenario, and I'm not doing a poll for this one, but I would love for everybody to submit the answer in the questions box so I can get a feel for what we're all thinking. So in a small office setting, there is gossip that two employees are dating. In these situations, there is frequently a feeling among some of the staff that having a couple in such a small business setting is counterproductive. Excessive public displays of affection might cause other employees to feel uncomfortable, and there may be a worry that the dating employees may excessively look out for each other over other employees through actions, such as prioritizing, helping each other with work, or favoring each other's ideas or contributions. In situations like this, A, the company should potentially adopt a no relationship policy in order to remove this conflict of interest. B, the company should require the employees to end the relationship or require one member of the couple to leave the company. C, the company should rely on company policies and trainings. And D, all of the above. All right, so like I mentioned, go ahead and put the answer that you think is correct in the questions box. All right, seeing a few more come in. I'll give it another minute. Oh, I think we tricked a few people here. All right, so I'm seeing a lot of people saying C, which is the correct answer. However, I could see where some other people went with answering D or A or B. We're going to talk about why a no relationship policy might not be a great idea. It can cause some legal issues, and as well as B, So that's why A, B, and D are incorrect in this case. C is the correct answer. The company should rely on company policies and trainings. Now let's talk about it. It is inevitable that coworkers may date one another, but workplace relationships bring potential for increased employer liability and harassment and retaliation claims, especially for a relationship that forms between a supervisor and a subordinate, as we spoke about. Employers have several options when it comes to addressing workplace romances. Now we're going to take a look at these three options for you to consider for your small business, their potential pros and cons, and things such as compliance and other issues you need to keep in mind when making your decision. All right, so a couple of people answered A. Let's ban workplace relationships completely. Most employers realize that a ban on romantic relationships, although it may sound great to reduce your liability, is really, really difficult to enforce. And honestly, it often just forces your employees to keep their relationship a secret. However, if an employer does decide to ban romantic relationships in the workplace, you can do so, but be very careful wording the policy. Courts have found that policies which use the word fraternize, such as ABC employer has a non-fraternization policy, without an additional explanation, can discourage employees from exercising their rights under the NLRA Section 7. Additionally, in some states, such as California, privacy laws restrict an employer's ability to regulate employee relationships unless a conflict of interest is actually involved. So be careful that you're not breaking any laws in your state or federally if you are going to try and implement this policy. It needs to be worded very carefully. It should be worded by an attorney, or you should ask for a template from your HR professional. Option 2 is you can establish workplace agreements regarding relationships. In the agreement you see on the right side of the screen, it's just a general demonstration of an agreement or contract. It's not an actual one. So these agreements, if used, should be drawn up by an attorney. So some issues with love contracts, which are becoming more and more popular, include that some employees regard them as an invasion of privacy. They're literally disclosing their love life to you on a piece of paper. They can put HR in an awkward position, and those of us in HR know that that wouldn't be the only time we're put in awkward positions, but it can be uncomfortable. And they don't always protect against the most problematic romantic relationship. This kind of informed consent policy and associated agreement document normally sets forth that the relationship is consensual. It affirms that the employees are aware of the company's policies on sexual harassment and workplace ethics. And it also may state that the pair won't engage in favoritism, will maintain professionalism in the workplace, and never will take legal action against the employer or each other if the relationship ends. The employer definitely gains the benefit of knowing that up to the time the agreement is signed, there has been, we're assuming, no claimed harassment. And if it develops, the duty to report it is the responsibility of the individuals involved. And even with an increase in the number of companies using love contracts, their use is still not widespread. So like I mentioned earlier, if you're going to have a policy or a procedure, follow it. Option C was rely on policies and trainings, and this is the one that was the correct answer. It is used by the majority of employers and is generally effective and is considered a best practice in approaching workplace romances. With this approach, there are things to include and remember in your policy and training in order to best mitigate risk and address potential concerns of relationships and dating in the workplace. And in the example I read out loud, there was a situation going on, and one of the options said to create a policy that says no relationships. It's important that we already have policies in place before the relationship arises, because we don't want it to seem like we're discriminating against that couple specifically. So make sure that you're one step ahead and that you already have these policies in place. Here are 4 things that should be part of your policy and training. 1, conduct regular sexual harassment prevention training. 2, policies for managers and employees in sensitive or influential positions. 3, be aware of and monitor any potential coercion and or non-consent. And of course, properly communicate company policies. It is important to make sure your company policies are in writing, are accessible through the employee handbook, and use language that does not single out opposite sex partnerships as the norm. If you don't have policies in writing, let's get them in writing. But even if you don't have policies in writing, it's important to consider any past precedent that you have set within your organization, because consistency is key. All right, so what do you do now? Make sure you're developing comprehensive anti-harassment, workplace violence, and conflict of interest policies. You can reach out to us, we can assist with this. Consistently enforce workplace policies at all levels and consistently. Monitor existing workplace relationships for compliance with workplace rules. Proactively address changes in relationship status and review security protocols. And of course, we are here to help, as I mentioned throughout the presentation. Our HR services team can help you with all your state and federal law updates. Being that it's the new year, we can help you update and create your employee handbook, review your current policies, and provide you with template policies, keep up with changing state and federal laws, and day-to-day HR best practices, provide forms, policies, etc. Our compliance package, which is our most popular package, and I see quite a few of our clients on here today, also includes a learning management system with a broad array of employee and manager trainings, including state compliant harassment prevention training. All righty. Well, we're gonna take a moment, we're gonna see if there's any questions. And as I'm doing that, I wanna remind everybody these webinars do happen every other week at the same time. So they will be Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern time. You can go to our website to see our upcoming March webinars. The first one in March is gonna be regarding PTO policies, which we keep getting lots of questions about. So we're excited about that one. All right, I don't see any questions that have come in. So if you didn't get a chance to ask your question or think of something after the fact, definitely email our team at hrservices@payentry.com. And thank you all so much for joining us today and for your time. Have a wonderful rest of your day.